Oh, hey everyone, Justin here. Today we're doing a review of the Peloton Spin Bike. It's a little bit of a divergence for me compared to what I usually do with some of the more serious cycling and triathlon stuff, but if you're new to my channel, first off, welcome. If you're not, hi, welcome back. A little bit of context before we dive in. I promise you, please don't skip this. I think it's important because I think one of the reasons that people mess up their Peloton reviews is they don't provide context. So for me, one, I didn't pay for the Peloton at all. I have free access to it in my apartment gym. Two, I'm a cyclist and Ironman triathlete living in Seattle, Washington. This is a review targeted toward people who are either serious cyclists or triathletes or people who are just looking to use the Peloton to improve their general fitness. And then thirdly, we're not going to dive too deep into specs and pricing. You know how much it costs. We'll touch on that a little bit at the end and give you a value prop. But really, if you're here, I respect that you want to get the bike. Let's talk about it. So first off, the hardware. It's actually a pretty damn good spin bike as a spin bike. I've used a lot of spin bikes in like my college gym or general gyms before, and Peloton is pretty much better than all of them. The big factor, which is really, really cool, is it attempts to measure your wattage. So if you don't know what wattage is, basically cycling power is measured in watts, and that is a numerical representation of the amount of effort that you are putting into the machine. And it's derived from how fast you're pedaling and how hard you're pedaling. That's really, really valuable because it allows repeatability on the same machine. So one of the problems that typical spin bikes have is you might have two people who are each pedaling at the same cadence, but one person is at 0 resistance and one person's at 75 resistance. They're obviously not doing the same amount of work. It is worth noting that it doesn't actually track power the same way that a real power beater does. You know, it's not measuring the physical force, it's just measuring cadence and how hard you've got that dial tightened. There's some possibility for calibration issues. That alone is worth using the Peloton bike versus a spin bike, in my opinion, as a serious training aid. That's awesome. Secondly, the screen is actually pretty good. It's a touch screen. It tilts forward and back. I've gotten mine overly sweaty. It's always been responsive. Nice. The speakers are built in. They're fine. They're a little bit tinny, but you know, whatever. I've said in the past that music quality doesn't matter a ton when you're working out. I stand by that. It's good enough. You can adjust a mix between the instructor and the music, which is really nice in your encore classes. I really appreciate that. I do wish the bike had heart rate monitors built in. I think there's absolutely plenty of room to put that on the handlebars. Would have been a really nice addition. The bike does have both Bluetooth and ANT Plus connectivity. So if you have Bluetooth headphones, you can connect to those. And if you have a ANT Plus or Bluetooth heart rate monitor, you can connect to that as well, which is nice. So you can get your heart rate displayed on the device. I do think it should have been built in. I do wish the screen was turnable. Peloton's recently added a bunch of floor exercises like yoga and stretching, and you don't have the ability to turn the screen. You can tilt it, but you can't turn it around and like show it to you on the floor. So if you're sitting on the floor, you can't see the screen. And then the big problem that I have on the hardware itself is you can adjust the seat up and down and you can adjust the handlebars up and down, but you can't adjust the handlebars forward and backward. That's actually a huge oversight compared to a ton of other spin bikes on earth. What it means for me is I can't actually replicate my road bike or my tri-bike position because if I put the handlebars low enough compared to where I actually want them, now they're too far back and I'll hit my knees on it if I stand up. The reality is it is simply not as adjustable as a ton of other spin bikes, even cheap spin bikes. All right, so let's dive into the classes, which is the meat of it. There's kind of 3 different types. There's fully live classes, there's encore classes, which are replays of live classes, but they reset the leaderboard and they're scheduled out so you join them in real time. And then there's replays of hundreds or thousands of classes that you can do at any time. There's no live or interactivity. You can just hop in at any point. One of the big reasons that people buy a Peloton is because they want that interactivity. You watch the Peloton commercials, you can see people interacting with the instructor, you can see people racing the other people in their class in real time. And I'll say, it's actually really cool. I did enjoy that interactivity with the instructors. I did find myself being more competitive against the people that are near me on the leaderboards in real time. Super, super cool. Big problem with that though is because the classes are live, or even encore, Peloton likes to tout about how convenient they are, how you can do them at any time from your home. As someone who lives in Seattle, which is Pacific time, and as someone who likes to work out after work, I was actually not impressed with the class availability at all. In fact, there's almost no classes available when I want them, which is kind of between like 6:30 p.m. and maybe like 9 p.m. For me, there's actually more classes available between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. than after work for me, which is a huge bummer. So if you're considering getting a Peloton, I highly recommend that you go into their app, set up a free account, and then check the scheduling availability for the classes, because the reality is, for me, I was having to work out at 10 or 11 p.m. and a lot of times I didn't even get live classes. I had encore classes. And on Fridays, there were simply no classes available for me after work at all. And you might say, well, Justin, you can just do one of the replay classes. You absolutely can at any time, but as someone who, was starting to actually appreciate the live elements of Peloton, it was kind of a bummer to think about logging in and doing all those replay classes. It just felt like a workout DVD. Typically, you might be doing the exact same types of classes every day because you don't have access to those other classes. So I really wanted to do more of the power zone rides, the interval rides, and they did some pro cyclist rides at some point. And the reality is I basically can't do those. Like, I wanted a 45-minute class and I simply didn't have those available. So the types of classes that are available to you also then impact the types of classes you do. So next, I would just say that Peloton likes to talk about the bike. They like to sell you the bike, but I would argue that Peloton more so is actually a service, because the bike is a spin bike. We all know what a spin bike is, but it's the service and it's those instructors that are going to either keep you coming back routinely and consistently or letting it sit in the corner unused. I'm not really the type of person who typically finds myself engaging in that sort of thing. The Peloton is motivating, and the reason I spent all that time lamenting the lack of live classes is because I was bummed that I couldn't do those live classes because they were that much better competing with real people in real time. That said, moving into a con in terms of the actual quality of the class, in terms of the fitness. So will it get you fit? Yes, if you do any amount of cardio for 30 or 45 minutes a day, a few times a week, and you work really, really hard, of course your cardio is going to increase. That's not unique to Peloton. But in terms of progressive fitness and getting better as a cyclist and really building your strength in the most optimal way, Peloton's not really there. And even more than that, I would say that the classes really are not connected to each other at all. They're almost designed as standalone classes. So you might just show up to a class, that class has no bearing on the class you did yesterday, and it has no bearing on the class you did tomorrow. You might be absolutely destroyed from yesterday's class, but today's class might also be super, super hard. It's not built in at all. A lot of the classes are simply not designed to account for people's varying fitness. So a Trainer Road, for instance, is a very popular serious cycling training aid, and it works by basically assessing your fitness at the beginning and then building out workouts that are based off percentages of basically your max power, let's call it. Peloton doesn't do anything like that. Your instructor will give you ranges. So they'll say, let's go from 100 RPM to 110 RPM and from 45 resistance to 60 resistance. And then it's sort of up to you to self-seed into that range. And there were a lot of times where I was really, really actively putting an effort into trying to follow along, and I just couldn't. Really struggled to drop down to as low as what the instructor wanted me to do. There were times that I struggled to get up to as high as the instructor wanted me to do. Regardless of your fitness, whether you're a beginner or super advanced, the Peloton doesn't account for any of that, and you have to essentially hope that you are lucky enough to fall into the range the Peloton is aiming to. Interestingly, Peloton has those leaderboards like I talked about, and you can actually click on the individual people and you can see in real time how they're putting out, or their RPM or their resistance. And what I've noticed is the top 10 or 15 people in any class, they're not following the class at all. So they're putting out a massive amount of power, but they're not following the instructor. So that said, a couple of little quirks: you can't pause the replay classes. Secondly, even in October of 2019, when I'm filming this, there are still software quirks. One of the ones that I found was if you type in your username, and then if you mistype your password, what it will do is it will then show that incorrect password in your username field. And then lastly, just want to talk on cost real quick. So by the time you factor in the bike, basically the mandatory accessories and delivery and setup and 1 year of required service when you get it, you're basically looking at about $2,800. When you actually compare Peloton to some of the other options that people might be using. So SoulCycle is about $35 a class. CycleBar is about $20 a class. Orange Theory is about $180 a month, roughly. Those are all the numbers that I found. But basically what it comes down to is Peloton is actually pretty decently comparable on price, especially if you are riding, let's say 3 or 4 times a week, which I think is what they want people to be doing. And then nextly, how does Peloton compare to spin classes? I don't think you need to compare it necessarily to spin classes. I think you need to treat it like a spin class at home. And that includes all of the pros, like you already know, and the cons, like the availability and the lack of pausing. That's all wrapped up into one. It's a spin class at home. How does Peloton compare to something like Trainer Road or some of the Zwift programs? In terms of motivation, if you are struggling to actually get on your indoor spin bike, you might give Peloton a try. In terms of like a long-term trainer aid, or in terms of being on the bike that you already own and getting more comfortable on that bike in those fit geometries, you know, Peloton doesn't come anywhere close to that. As a training aid, Trainer Road, or even some of the Zwift training tools are far more advanced than Peloton. There's not really any comparison there. So in conclusion, if you're still watching this and you're still not sure, the best workout is the one you do. I was actually pretty damn impressed with how Peloton motivated me to get on the bike even at 11 p.m. when I didn't want to. If you think to yourself, damn, I think I would actually use the Peloton, then get it. It is a good piece of gear and you will improve your cardio, you will, spend time on it and it's gonna work for you. That's not complicated. If you're a serious cyclist and triathlete who's looking at getting on Peloton for whatever reason, if you really struggle with indoor motivation, like a lot of people, it could be a good tool. If you think you can get through something like Zwift or Trainer Road, they're gonna be better for you long term. If you have any questions or anything like that, you know what to do. I hope you liked it. If you did, if you found it valuable, like it. And if you want to come back for more, you guys know how to subscribe. You're smart. Leave a comment if you want, and I will see you on the next one. I hope you have a fantastic day.